I'm Mary Isbell, and this is our first video for the Open Pedagogy project. Our goal today is to find what resources are already out there in the OER world for the course you're revising this summer. So you'll see that I am at the OpenLab homepage. This is at unewhavendh.org, and OpenLab is a platform you can use to build open resources for your course and also to co-create resources with your students. And you'll see some examples that are available publicly in the Communication Toolkit, Introduction to Audiology, Thinking Historically About COVID-19, Digital Humanities Lab, the grant writing course. So I created this grant writing course, GH Lab. Dr. Ranovic's created this course, Intro to Audiology and Communication Toolkit was created by Laura Silva. So there are many examples already on here, and you can see that I built the Open Pedagogy project through OpenLab as well. So our program's website is here. I just want to show you quickly that if you go to the help page at the top, we have really robust help resources that just coming together now to help you and to help your students feel comfortable using OpenLab. So that's an exciting new development. So let's navigate using this homepage to get to the Open Pedagogy project. And where we're going to start today is in looking at the resources that we've curated for you here at the University of New Haven, knowing some of the things you're interested in. So what you can do is go to our Open Pedagogy Zotero library. And this is just a page on the website describing the library, but if you click the image, you'll be taken to the open library in Zotero that has resources curated about OER. There's a whole lot out there about open educational resources, and it can be hard to navigate. So we're trying to curate things that we think are most helpful and also to apply some tags. So when you want to get started thinking about OER, you can click on everything that's been tagged in that way, and you can see that library is even easier to navigate. There are 14 things to look at. And I'm going to direct you to this Introduction to Open Educational Resources, which is one chapter in the book, the OER Starter Kit Workbook, created by Abby Elder and Stacy Katz. This is a fantastic introduction to OER and one that we're going to use essentially in this video. By creating this video and making it openly licensed, I am essentially remixing what Stacy and Abby have created and making it really, customized for our purposes in this first week, which is something that you'll all be working on doing this summer. So I'm trying to model what you can do. So let's look at this resource. This entire resource is a workbook. It introduces OER and it provides exercises along the way to help make it click, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, the need for that kind of synthesis work for your students. It's useful for you as well. So I'm going to hop around in this workbook today for our purposes. This entire thing, however, is so useful and it's something I return to again and again. So I'm going to start here with a definition of OER. Open educational resources are openly licensed, freely available educational materials that can be modified and redistributed by users. They can include any type of educational resource from syllabi to full courses. And I want to start with that definition because I'm encouraging you all to search before our first meetings for OER specifically, not for any free resource that's out there, but specifically for OER. OER are openly licensed, and we'll go look really quickly to just clarify what that means. They're freely available, so you don't have to pay to access. If anything, students might pay to have a print copy of what is freely available online. And they're modifiable, and this is really important. You want to choose things that you can copy and adapt, or what's called remixing in the world of OER. And so we want to help you identify things that are licensed in that way so that as you figure out exactly what you want them to be in your class, you're able to make those modifications according to the way the resource you found is licensed. Okay, so this is a really helpful addition to this section in this workbook, because it's easy to say what OER is, but it's a little more challenging to identify when something is close but not quite OER. So here's a table that explains some things that we might often misunderstand as OER. So things that are available through the library often are copyrighted, but the university has paid for access to those resources so students can see them for free. You can download the PDF and share it for free, but you definitely can't modify it because it is copyrighted by that author. And similar to any other online resources, if you don't see a Creative Commons license or any license indicating that you can freely adapt, then you should assume that it is copyrighted. So let's take a moment and switch over to that section of this guide. Like I said, I'm going to jump around a little bit. But the Creative Commons licenses section is really helpful. Creative Commons licenses essentially allow an author to explain in plain language how their creative works can be reused. And that is because they want them to be reused. They don't want to retain copyright, and they don't want people who want to use what they've created to have to contact them to ask questions. So these licenses act as explicit standing permissions for all users. So these are the 4 components that can be used in combinations that we'll see in a second. There's Creative Commons attribution. You'll also see it written as CC BY, and that's where you essentially must give attribution to the creator. Share alike. Iterations of the original work must be made available under the same license terms. Non-commercial means that the work cannot be sold at a profit or used for commercial means, such as for-profit advertising. And finally, no derivatives. So if this license is applied, it means that the work can't be altered or remixed. It must retain its exact shape. So here's how these 4 elements of Creative Commons licenses get combined. So what we see here in this graph, which actually we can open up, Wiley's 5 R's are David Wiley's principles of open educational resources, that the resources can be retained, reused, revised, remixed, and redistributed. That's what's along the top line here. And along the side, we have the various licenses available from Creative Commons, just to show how these licenses interact with some of the goals of the open educational movement. So you can see that the CC BY license is the most commonly used license because it allows those who read and want to make use of what you've created to do all of the things that David Wiley has defined as important for OER. You can retain it, you can reuse it, you can revise it, you can remix it, and you can redistribute it. Some of these other licenses restrict things a little bit more, and the main reason I would point these things out now is as you do the exercise today to try to find open resources, you might find yourself liking a resource that has a non-derivative component in its license, which would just mean that you could use it, but you couldn't adapt it in any way. And that might make things a little more complicated as you try to use that resource in the classroom, depending what you plan to do with it. So it's useful before you go through that exercise to have a little bit of a sense of what these are. But again, it's challenging at first to make sense of this, and it will click more in what comes in the future as you start to do it yourself. So the main thing we want to focus on today is how to find OER. And I quickly want to draw attention to some things for you to pay attention to as you're looking at OER and deciding if they're useful for your class. I'm not going to go into depth on this, but pay attention, remembering, of course, that open resources like any publication, can have varying levels of quality. You may find that clarity is not perfect, can be improved. It may not be as easy for your students to comprehend the explanation of something given in the resource you found. And it might be hard actually in the way it's formatted for it to be easily read. So think about clarity, comprehensibility, and readability. Think about whether the content is accurate. Is it up to your standards, or is that going to take it out of the running as far as you're concerned? Can it be adapted, and can it be organized differently? Will your students understand it? Is it appropriate for them? Is it interesting for them? One of the things I'll mention here is something that fellows found really useful last summer was finding a resource that was close but wasn't quite perfect, and they actually invited students to help them make it better. So there it would be really important to make sure that you can adapt it, so you can make it better in the future, and then you can bring a resource into the classroom that isn't quite perfect in its, reaching the audience of your students. And you can work together with your students to make it better. And actually, that learning experience can be richer than if you had presented your students with a perfect resource right out of the gate. So we'll definitely talk about this as you start looking and as we start talking about what you're going to do with these materials. And finally, you should always be paying attention to accessibility, particularly can a screen reader engage with it? Is alt text available for those who are using screen readers and can't see the images? Are any videos closed captioned accurately? And can students access the materials pretty quickly and with ease, even from, say, an internet connection that isn't as strong? Now, this is challenging, and you might find resources that are excellent except for the accessibility piece, and then you may decide to adapt to make them more accessible. So hopefully you're starting to see why the licensing on the resources that you bring into whatever project you're working on matter, because you want to be able to always be moving forward, always be making progress, always engaging perhaps even your students in making things better. And you can do that most easily if you're using content that can be adapted. All right, it's time to do a worksheet and find some OER. So we're going to go back up here. This is just to show you how to find it in the workbook. If we would go to finding open content, you'll find that the very beginning links to something called the OER Treasure Hunt worksheet in Google Docs. And so if you click the link, you're going to see this worksheet, which many people have used and found very helpful. I thought a lot about whether I wanted to remix this worksheet before sharing it with all of you. And ultimately decided that it's really well thought out and great as it is. I thought that I might add some different places to search, but when I looked at what they're recommending, it's better than what I would have recommended. So this is a fantastic worksheet. The main thing that I've done is I've changed what we might call the platform for delivering this worksheet. It's a Google Doc right now. All I did is download it as a Word document and make it so that I can attach it as a Word document attachment to an email for all of you, so it's really easy to just download and do on your computer. But because I haven't changed any of the content, I've retained the same attribution statement that was on there when Abby Elder created it. If I had made any changes, I could have created a new attribution statement to give credit to Abby Elder, but kind of talk about the fact that I had adapted it. The main thing I want to do before ending this video is show you how to search YouTube for openly licensed materials. This is something that I didn't know how to do until I learned along this process. So if I search dental hygiene on YouTube, only after you've searched can you change your filters. And then you can select only videos that have a Creative Commons license. It is worth note that YouTube as a platform no longer makes it possible for users to remix Creative Commons licensed content. There used to be a feature like this, so you might see it referenced in places. But what YouTube now recommends, and what makes sense in the Creative Commons community, is reach out to the person who created the video, if you can identify who it was, and ask for a copy of the video to remix it. If they licensed it as openly licensed and available for reuse, they should be willing to share it with you, for you to make a further adaptation of it. Thanks for watching.